Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. I am delighted that James Devine will be joining me, and we will be discussing forgiveness. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Bruce.
It is my pleasure. I'm delighted you could join us and take a minute or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
So I am 57 years old. I had a career in the Army band for about 10 years. And after that, I moved into public school teaching where I taught band for 25 years. I'm still teaching part-time at a charter school, but I just retired from the public school system and am spending most of my time doing motivational speaking and consulting and helping out different bands who are in different stages of their growth. I married my high school sweetheart. We've been married almost 37 years with 4 grown kids. And then the best part of my life is the 10 grandkids that I have.
Do you think the marriage is going to last?
I think so.
Now, did you serve in the Army?
Yes. So I was in the Army band.
I understand.
In Virginia,
So
Japan.
first, I thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And second, I know the answer, but explain, because people think that if you're in the band, you're not a real soldier and you didn't do basic training and all the rest of it.
So you do all the same training, you go to basic training, and in fact, you have to almost put up with people making fun of you because they're like, oh, you're in the band. But yet when we go perform somewhere, people really appreciate it. And in the Army, at least when I was in, there were about 25 or 30 tasks that we called common tasks. And every year, and they were first aid, setting off a bomb properly, firing your weapon, all kinds of the things that every soldier needs to know. And so every year you're tested on those things, and you have to be able to pass those tests to continue in your Army career. So I kind of like that philosophy. The Army's philosophy is everyone's a soldier. You have some specialties like band, or you might be a cook, or you might be something else that's not always firing a weapon, but ultimately you have to all be ready to grab your rifle and shoot the enemy if you have to.
Now, I have a question for you that has nothing at all to do with our topic, but I'm going to take advantage of your band experience in the military. I asked my professor, who is English, this question. I've asked a number of English friends, and none of them was able to give me a decent answer. On D-Day, when you had every weapon available to the U.S. Armed Forces, the British Armed Forces, and the Canadian Armed Forces, being fired at the Germans, the British, and I think the Canadians as well, had bagpipers with them. It is inconceivable that even if they were standing right beside the bagpiper, that anybody could have heard the bagpiper. So why would there have been bagpipers?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. My thought is maybe, well, there's all kinds of different things in here. So I may offend some bagpipers.
I do it all the time.
The bagpipe is a very dangerous instrument. So maybe there was some kind of psychological attack they were about to do for the enemy. But if you had said they had a band, so there is an interesting story from Vietnam. I'm not old enough to have been there, but apparently there was a company of soldiers that was completely surrounded by the enemy. They weren't quite sure what to do. And so they actually held a parade with the band in the front, playing just like you would in a parade. And the enemy apparently was so confused by this, they thought that maybe they had been overrun or infiltrated, that they took off and ran. So maybe that was what they were trying to do on D-Day.
Well, I made a little mistake. I used to be the assistant executive director of a Jewish federation, and we had a Jewish community center, which we owned and ran, and where our offices were located. And we rented out rooms. And we rented out one room to the Jewish war veterans. And the room wasn't set up, so we were in the cafe chatting. And one of the vets asked me where I was during the Vietnam War. And I looked at him straight in the eyes and I said, I was in Canada. Well, it got very cold in that room very quickly, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized what I had said and what they had heard. And I looked at them and I said, guys, I was in high school in Canada during the Vietnam War. And then one gentleman asked me, well, would you have served if you had been here? And the rest of them said, that is a stupid question. You can't ask somebody that question. They can't possibly give an honest answer. And I said, well, I can tell you this. I was in Israel. I could have done a lot of shenanigans to get out of serving in the army, but I didn't. So they liked me again. They forgave me, which brings us to our topic, forgiveness. What is forgiveness?
Forgiveness, a lot of people misunderstand forgiveness, because I've seen it, and I've started sharing my story about 27 years ago to the public. Before that, it was just my family who had known my story. And I don't know if you want me to tell a little bit about my story.
Please.
All right. So when I was about 6 years old, my father was abusive. And so we had to escape from my father. And we went back to my mom's native country of Italy. And while there, a friend of the family sexually violated me over a course of several years. And when you're a little kid, there's a lot of forgiveness that happens as a kid, especially when someone says, I'm sorry, this will never happen again. You naively believe that that is true. And so I believed him that this would happen. And the abuse happened from about 6 to age 9. After that, you would think that things would go kind of back to normal, or your life would move on. But if you hold on to something in your heart, it ends up becoming like a cancer and affecting you in many different ways. And so as I became a teen and I realized what this guy had done, I began to hate him. I mean, he was gone. I don't know where he moved to, but he was gone out of my life. But the hatred was developing in my heart till about the age of 16 or so. I could really say that when I hear stories on the news and you hear about some battered wife or someone who's gone through some abuse, and then they just kill their spouse, and everyone's like, why didn't they just go to the police? Why didn't they just do something? I understand exactly what they're going through, because this is the emotions that were coming up in my life. And at the age of 16, I realized that I could not continue to harbor this hate for this man, because it was affecting me. It wasn't affecting him any. So I made the decision to forgive him. And that was like the first step forward in a 1,000-mile journey. So going back to what I started this speaking with, a lot of people look at forgiveness as like, it means that you don't take, for example, you wouldn't take police action or something like that. But that's not true at all. You can forgive somebody and then still prosecute them. You can forgive somebody and still make sure that they face the consequences of what they're doing. But it's something that's more for you. And forgiving means I'm letting go of wanting the revenge for that. And I'm releasing that revenge to God to take care of. But you could still prosecute and do those kind of things.
If I'm not mistaken, and I know I'm not, one of the 12 steps, not that I don't even drink, but one of the 12 steps in AA is asking for forgiveness. And if you ask somebody for forgiveness and they won't forgive you, then that's okay. You've done what you could do, so now you can move on to the next step. If there is a next step, I don't know. But there is another side to the story of forgiveness. Do you have to tell the person that you're forgiving them, or do you have to tell yourself that you're forgiving them?
I think you have to tell yourself, because now for that person to find true healing, they're going to need let me back up a little bit again. Forgiveness is different than reconciliation. So in the case of what happened to me, that was such a violation of that little boy. That was such a violation to my spirit that I don't think there could ever be reconciliation. I thought about this as I got older, as I turned into my late 30s, early 40s, is when Facebook was first starting to get bigger. And my sister had been friends with his daughter, and reconnected probably about 18 years ago, reconnected on Facebook. Maybe it was a little bit less than that. But I reconnected with his daughter as well on Facebook. And I noticed that he was listed as one of her friends. And that brought up all kinds of these emotions that I thought were gone and in the past. And what I thought about is like, what if he did show up at my door? What if he did try to contact me? What if he sent me an email? What if he tried to send me a friend request? And so the conclusion I came to in all of that was that, for example, if he were to show up on my front porch and say, hey, I repent of what I did. I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you. Then I would tell him, I forgive you. Now get off my porch. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing incongruous in that. There's sometimes a sin can be so grievous that there cannot be reconciliation. Now, if he had, if my sister had stolen something from me as a kid and I could not bring myself to forgive her, and then she came to me and asked for forgiveness, and we had 20 years where we didn't talk, and it was because of my lack of forgiveness, that would be bad if I didn't try to reconcile with her. So back to your question, the person does not have to know that they have received forgiveness. Now, hopefully, if they are repentant of what they've done, hopefully they're going to seek that either from God, or if they've hurt someone, sometimes it can be appropriate to go to that person. But sometimes it can just be appropriate to just ask God for forgiveness and move on. I think about stupid things I did when I was in high school, and it would be silly now to go back 40 years later and contact someone and say, you know what, I said some mean things to you on that one day in lunch, and I just wanted to ask you to forgive me. Now, if I saw them in person, we were at the same event, I might do that, but I'm not going to seek them out for that.
My philosophy, which has worked very well for me, I've had it tough, not as tough as you, I'm not comparing, but is never forgive, never forget, but move on. Critique my philosophy of life.
Why would you say never forgive? I agree with the never forget part.
And the move on part.
And the move on part, correct. Both of those are great, but I'm not sure if I agree with the never forgive part.
When you forgive, you're telling yourself that what they did to you, the way they treated you, was all right. And I can't do that. I'll give you an example of how it works out. You were worried about getting into trouble? I'm going to show you how to get in trouble on the internet. When I was in high school, I had 5 years of absolute hell with the Ukrainian students and the principal and the vice principal. All of them were anti-Semites. All the anti-Semites in the school were Ukrainians. And until I figured out how to humiliate the principal in front of everybody, so they knew that I wasn't afraid of them, I had to put up with this. If I don't remember any of their names, I wouldn't know them if I were to pass them on the street. But when I hear about the war in Ukraine, couldn't care less. As far as I'm concerned, even though the president of the Ukraine is a Jew, they're all anti-Semites. I can't change that. That's part of who I am. And sorry.
But why would you put them all in the same bucket? So
because I never met a Ukrainian who was not an anti-Semite. And when I asked people about it, the response was Jews and Gentiles. I asked them, why are they like that? I mean, I never did anything to any of them. They said they learn it in church.
And that is sad. That makes me sad to hear that. I came to the conclusion many years ago because, as you know, in our society recently, it wasn't always good to be a middle-aged white man, and it really bothered me when to me, it's this kind of the same thing as what you're experiencing in your own life. Because someone faced discrimination by a white man, then they put all of us in the same category. And I told them I've been anti-racist since I was a kid, before there was a term called anti-racist. And I learned that from my mom. And she gave me the best example you could give. My sister and I, we used to have these little monkeys. I don't know where we got these names from them, but we called them little boy, big one, and little girl, big one. She had a girl monkey. I had a boy monkey. When I look back at pictures from the 60s and 70s, these were a popular item that people could get. So when we were living in Naples, there was a U.S. Navy guy who wanted to date my mom. She was a young Italian.
Naples, Italy, or Naples, Florida?
Yes, Naples, Italy. Okay. That's where my mom's from. So we went back there, but she had contact with Americans a lot. There's a big Navy base still there. And so this guy came in. He was my mom was really good looking when she was young. And at this point, she's probably in her late 20s. And he's coming over for dinner. He's sitting down, just playing with the kids and trying to earn bonus points with my mom. He holds up our monkeys and he said, "Do you know where Black people come from?" And he said, they come from these monkeys. I never saw anyone kicked out of a place faster. And I'm so proud of my mom. My mom is definitely not perfect, but in that case, I am so proud of what she did. And that taught me a very important lesson. She never looked at anybody differently because of their socioeconomic class or their national heritage or this color of their skin. She treated everybody equally. And I am blessed to have learned that from her. But he was trying to apologize. He was like, "I was just joking. I didn't really mean it," but he was out there. No, and we went on.
It reminds me of a friend of mine whose mother would always talk about the evils of discrimination and racism. And we're having this conversation, or she's giving us this lecture, because I was probably 17. My friend was driving, so we had to be over 16, all right? And my friend being her son. And she was sitting in the passenger seat in the front row, and I was seated behind her. And 3 Black teenagers were approaching us as she was giving us this lecture against racism. And just totally a natural movement, she picked up her elbow and locked the door. I didn't say a word. I didn't want to embarrass her. But there are some things that are just ingrained. And the question is, who do you can see lovely videos on YouTube or on the internet in general of Black and white children hugging each other, playing with each other. They don't know from race. They don't know from religion. They know from nice and not nice. So the issues of racism and of hurting, I think, comes from adults, comes from parents who are bad examples for their children.
I don't think it always does.
Okay.
Sometimes it does, but not always. So where did Cain learn to murder? I don't think Adam and Eve taught him, and his spiritual grandfather was God himself. But he murdered his brother out of jealousy. He didn't learn that from his parents. So I think our natures are corrupt, and we have to be careful about how we all have that potential. Depending on how we're raised is a very important part of it. The disciplines we put in our life, they can be an important part. The things we let take control of our life. So in my view, Cain let the jealousy of his brother take over his rational thought and ended up killing his brother.
Said something interesting. You said a lot of things that are interesting, but just then you said something interesting. You said in our nature. Is it now in our nature is racism, there's bigotry. Is there forgiveness?
I think there is. There's forgiveness. You see some people who go to it naturally, and some people have to really, really work at it. So for me, the forgiveness, with the exception of this abusive man, came to me naturally. There were a bunch of things my mom did and my sister did growing up, and I was easily able to forgive them. But this one thing I was holding on to, and now I've gone back to that part of my nature where it's easy for me to forgive. When in fact, now as an older person, I still teach half-time at a middle school, and the kids do a lot of stupid things. They're middle schoolers, and if they're disrespectful, that's something I really don't like. But if they're just doing stupid teen stuff that we all did, then they get their consequences, of course, of whatever it is. But I don't hold that too much against them.
Well, children will be children, as the saying goes, boys will be boys, but then again, girls will be girls. It's all in our nature. What comes after forgiveness?
It's a process. So for me, I realized that there were a lot of mindsets that so many things combine to create us and make us who we are, and our personalities, and shape our personalities, whether that's upbringing, the people we meet, the people we experience. And so for me, I call it a 1,000-mile journey, because a lot of people think, oh, once you forgive, everything's great then, and you move on. No, there's steps you have to take. And when you start that journey, if it really is 1,000 miles, you can't see the end of it yet, but you're headed towards that destination. And now at the age of 57, I'm at about mile 997, and I can see the end. And I can't see where I started back when I was 16 with it. And so it's different stages of healing. And now I told you the great thing my mom did, but she had many faults too. So my mom, for some reason, was against counseling. And I really think counseling could have helped me. But at the age of 16, she heard that's when I told her what happened. That was the beginning of my forgiveness journey. She should have gotten me into counseling, and a lot of these steps would have happened. I might have been able to move up to mile 500 in a short period of time. Instead, that took me 12 or 13 years to get up to that point. And I did a lot of reading and assimilating things that people who had been through similar things or different kinds of abuse. And I didn't go to counseling till I was in my 40s. But by then I was about 93% of the way there. And that helped me to move up a couple more percent.
Did serving in the Army help you?
Yes, it did. So the main thing for that one, when I look back, got several things. My father, I was not close to him because he was abusive to my mom. And in the 70s, that was something that people kind of turned their eye away from instead of prosecuting it. So I was never close to him. He never abused me, but I was always just terrified of him. So then I grew up with a very, I don't know how to say it, a very worried mom. So she was one of those, she said she used to run behind us when we were toddlers to catch us so we wouldn't hurt ourselves if we fall. I think about how I look at my grandkids, I'm just watching them, and if they fall, as long as they stay away from the sharp corner of the coffee table, then they'll get hurt a little bit, but they'll recover from it. And so I was a real mama's boy, and the Army helped to take that out of me, because you're not going to go to basic training and complain, or you're not going to last long if you do complain or say, oh, you're being too tough on us, and that sort of thing. So that really helped to bring that out in me, my manly side, so to speak. Not that there's anything wrong. I would say on a emotional scale, I'm a 10, which is higher than I would put most women at on an emotional scale, but that's how I'm built. But it doesn't mean I can't go out and rough around but so that was the very good part for me. And then also to start being rewarded I never had much self-esteem growing up. And one of the things was I was never good at the sports kind of things that a lot of young men were into. So music was something that really gave me a lot of self-esteem. In the Army, I started picking up some promotions and was at a high level for my job, and that helped with the whole self-esteem part of things.
So let's see. The Ukrainians are going to come after me. Women are going to come after you because you say they're not sympathetic as men. Who else can we offend?
You missed what I said. I said I'm a 10 on the emotional scale.
And women are?
And I would say the average woman is at like a 7 or 8.
That's enough.
But there's some that go from 0 to a 10, and there's men who go from a 0 to a 10. But yeah, you're right. Someone will probably come after me.
Yeah, you can't get out of it. Someone will take it, edit it. You asked me if I edit these. I don't know how to edit. Whatever happens, happens. This is obviously not television, but it's live. So we stand or fall by our honest, unedited statements. Now, I am going to share your contact information with our viewers, and I'll put us back. Is there any question that you wish I had asked you that I didn't? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
I'm not sure if there's a question I would have answered. If I can also add something to what you have on the screen there, if someone doesn't want to go to all that trouble, if they just remember jamesdevine.net, then that's my website. But I really think that this message of forgiveness is really important. I really appreciate that you had me on this podcast, and I hope that you will meet some Ukrainians that will show you that they're not all like that. I've met a few myself who I think are very decent people who escaped. This was about a year ago now that I first met them. I don't remember when the war first started, but they had been in the US about 4 weeks when I met them, and they were escaping because they didn't like what was going on and wanted a better life for themselves. And just like my mom came to the US, and lots of people have come to the US for a better life. We're not a perfect country, but there's a lot of good opportunity here. So my hope is that you will meet some of the nice Ukrainians.
Well, I thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
You might recall, I asked you before we started if there was any changes you wanted to make in this slide. I forgive you for not saying you wanted your .NET website put up.
I didn't think about that.
They're forgiven. It's over with. James, thank you very much. I appreciate more than anything else your honesty and your candor, and as well as your service. Everybody serves, as I point out, if you don't have the clerk who's pushing paper, the soldiers at the front don't have bullets. So everybody contributes, including members of the band. So
Thank you so much, Bruce.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.